And welcome to the inaugural edition of Quoth the Raven. My name is Louis Bright Raven, and those of you who don't know me, I'm a 26-year in the comic book industry professional, as well as worked in role-playing game industry and science fiction, fantasy, and horror fiction industries, as well as other media entertainment. I've also done many other things in regards to talent scouting and promoting of other creators in the markets as well. Today, we are going to be doing question and answers and reviewing some independent comics. And hopefully we'll get it all done in 2 hours, because that's the only time that YouTube apparently has allotted me for my first show. So, without further ado, let's get on to the questions and a little bit of a background check on myself. Well, as I said, I'm a 26-year professional writer, artist, editor, talent scout, studio manager, and publisher who has served in multiple capacities in various entertainment markets, including comics, role-playing games, science, fantasy, and horror fiction markets, and pop cultural journalism. I was the co-founder and worked as the vice president and later president of the Comics Artists Press Alliance at Central Michigan University in the early 90s. We were basically doing setup for students to learn how to do sequential art for comics, and then producing our own books and selling them in the underground in comic book shops and other places across Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and elsewhere for those 3 years. And then when I graduated, I went on to do other things, including founding and owning Constellation Studios, which I've owned since 1993. And I've done many work with probably about 30 or 40 different creators who have moved on to working for most every publisher you can think of in comics and role-playing games. Question and answers. And yes, I am so darn glad you asked that, buddy. Our first question this evening is, what publications can I find your work in? Be it comics or fiction or whatever, from Kyle P. from Texas. Well, Kyle, I've worked for a lot of companies. I've worked with Arrow Comics, Caliber Comics, Comic Effect Magazine, my own Constellation Studios, Hasbro, Marvel, Ronin Studios, Slave Labor Graphics, Steve Jackson Games, TSR, Upper Deck, Wizards of the Coast, and many others as well. As it says, way too many to mention here. Whoops, something happened. I apologize for that. There we go. But here are some of the books that you can find some of my work in. Comic Effect number 22 from Comic Effect Magazine. I wrote an article covering Evan Dorkin's Hectic Planet Pirate Corps comic book series. Scar Tissue number 1, versions A and B. I was an interior pinup artist in that series. Spank the Monkey on the Comics Market number 1 from Arrow Comics. I did some research work for the creator on that series, Randy Zimmerman, and I also did some proofreading editing also for issues 2 and 3. Also for Arrow Comics, I was the inker for Wonderland number 1. I did not ink the cover that's being displayed there. I did the interior inks. The cover there is inked by Mr. Zimmerman over the penciler, whose name right now is escaping me. Oh, yes, Danny Wall. Zimmerman's Heroic Tales Volume 1. From Arrow Comics as a proofreader and editor for the text introductions and afterwards. And then Hardball number 1 through 3. Number 3 is shown here for the cover. I was a story editor on that project. It was created by Chad Curry. Wingman, the art of myself, Louis Bright Raven, Volume 1. Writer, artist, and publisher. And Atmosphere, which is a novella I did back in the 90s, where I was writer and publisher. I did not do this cover. This cover was done by one of the other member of Constellation Studios, Darren Peterson. And it's too small to read, but in the bottom right-hand corner, it says Nyrad, which is his name spelled backwards. I've also worked with Marvel licenses and Upper Deck on the Marvel Masterpieces trading cards sets, for Star Wars, for Lucasfilm licenses and fan commissions. I did an Ashcan sketchbook back in 2010 for the Charlotte Comic-Con Summer Spectacular convention. And I've also done many fan art commission prints, some more exclusive to specific retailers. And I have more to show, but it's a matter of finding the right photos and other things. And I don't really want to brag about too much. I just wanted to give people an idea of what I've done. So I hope that answers your question, Kyle. Second question of the day is, what made you decide that you wanted to do comics? Erica W. from Alaska. Well, Erica, I guess you could say what's got me into doing comics back in the early 90s. It started out actually around 85. I was 13 years old, and I was riding home from school on a bus, and I met this kid named Brian Roseboom, who was basically acting out scenes from the X-Men comics at the time. And I had already quit reading comics at the time. Whether I thought I was just too old for them or what the problem was, I don't know anymore. Anyway, I got off the bus at his bus stop, followed him home, and he introduced me to the comics, and I was basically hooked on that. And a few weeks later, I met some other students at the school that were doing their own underground comics. At the time in 85, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were very popular, and everybody wanted to do their own black and white independent comics because they always thought they were going to be the next big thing in the market. So I ended up proofreading a number of my friends' comics that way, and that's what got me. That's what basically was the bug that bit me and got me into comics. And then later in that, I established myself in an amateur press alliance zine. And then I got into college at Central Michigan, and we founded the Comic Artists Press Alliance at Central Michigan. And it moved on from there. Hope that answers your question. Our third question of the evening. What is your real stance on the topic of Comicsgate? You seem to have a differing opinion than that of Randy Zimmerman, on IndieVolt. IndieVolt's a channel that I sometimes do round robin discussions, and I'll explain more about that a little bit later in the show. Your thoughts from Rob W. in Michigan. Well, Rob, I'm not really sure that Randy and I disagree about things on Comicsgate. For those who aren't familiar with Comicsgate, it's basically a movement in the comic book industry currently. It's been going on for about 2, maybe 3 years. A little bit after Donald Trump was elected president. Apparently, some of the more well-known creators that had worked at Marvel or DC that were publicly out as having said they supported Trump apparently started having problems getting work. And they started making it a political statement that said, hey, this is why we're not getting work. It's prejudice. And they started criticizing the new creators that were coming in and calling them social justice warriors and liberals and all this other stuff that really, they're basically saying it's a lot of gatekeeping and blocking people to get into the business. And the thing of it is, there's always been gatekeeping in comics and other entertainment media. And it's based on a multitude of factors. There is racism, there's sexism, there's ageism, cronyism, all kinds of things. And I'm sure politics does play some factor into it. But the way that Comicsgate has misrepresented itself in a way, I guess you could say, is that it's all about this whole thing about Trump and conservatism versus liberalism, and it's not doing the industry any good. It's a very negative attitude, very negative prospects for not just people who are claiming that it's working against them, it's hurting everybody, because the attitude is more exclusionary than inclusive. And it's exactly the opposite of what we need to have in not just comics, but in society as a whole. So, Randy and I both agreed on that. I think where we might diverge in our way of thinking is when we've covered Comicsgate and covered creators who are well established and well connected to the Comicsgate community. Randy tends to promote some of the more well-known, very financially successful Comicsgate members who have crowdfunded their projects online in direct defiance, I guess you could say, of the regular comic book industry. And my viewpoint is some of those people probably wouldn't be as successful as they are if they didn't have the connections within the industry that they've had and the past successes they've had. So I don't think that their work is indicative of Comicsgate being a success so much as their own individual circumstances. And I would rather promote the guys who are less connected, less fortunate, I guess you could say, that are still part of that community. But if I'm going to promote somebody and promote their title, I'd rather promote someone who doesn't have the connections and doesn't have all the money being handed to them by the fan base already. And I think that's really the only real divergence of opinion that Randy and I have. So but as far as what my opinion on Comicsgate is, I think people just should realize that there's a lot of factors that go into why people get blocked from hiring. And it has to do, everybody's got their own personal quirks and their own personal idiosyncrasies in the management groups and stuff. And this business, as in all of entertainment, it's about how much butt you kiss, as much as well as your talent is. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends, so, that's basically my opinion on that. I hope that answers your question. And hold on a second. Okay, I got a notice over here from that. Okay, there we go. I apologize. And Rob W. has another question for us. I just have to get that set up for you. I believe that is showing now. Yes. If you were in charge of Marvel or DC right now, what would you really do? You seem to hold back on Indie Volt podcast. Again, I don't see where I hold back on things. I don't really. A lot of times, Randy says exactly the same thing that I would say. So I'm not really holding back. I'm just nodding in agreement with Randy a lot of the time. As for what I would really do with Marvel or DC, there's the childish wish way, I guess you could say, where, you'd like to be able to go in and kind of just like turn back the clock and get rid of a lot of bad content and a lot of creators that you don't like. But the reality is that would be very offensive to our audience base who have been supporting these books for the last 20, 30 years. And that's part of the problem that we've had for the last 20 or 30 years, because the industry keeps rebooting the characters over and over and over and retelling the same old stories. And that's part of what's alienating audiences today. So what would I really do? What I'd probably do is sit down with first with the management and editorial and talk to these people and see what their mindset really is, because a lot of times I don't understand what they're doing, but that's partly because I don't really communicate with them as I used to. So I would sit down and communicate with these people, find out what their view is and what they really want to do as editors. And if it's not on what I want to do, then I'll let them know, and they can, I'll give them some time, but they're going to get their walking papers, and I'll put some editors in that do things the way I want them done. And when I say things the way I want them done, I mean more of a situation where the creators have a little more creative control than they seem to have right now. Right now in the industry, it seems very there's certain creators who are up at the upper echelon and are given not so much carte blanche, but a lot of leeway in what they can do. And a lot of them, other ones, seem to be under a rather strict managerial editorial leash. And I think I'd rather even that out, balance that out a little bit. And I'd like to cut back on a lot of the redundant titles and find writers who want to take some of the characters that aren't being used and make those characters matter for audiences again. If we're going to have a bunch of titles from the same company, I'd rather have, 50 or 60 titles that are each individually standalone titles than have 12 or 15 Batman-related books or X-Men-related books in that respect. So that would probably be my change. The other thing I might change is that I would probably do levels of comics and set things up so that if we were going to have multiple, say, Batman titles, I'd have Batman titles that were suitable for all ages, and then teens, and then more mature audiences. And so that comic book shops would know what to sell to whom, rather than just try to sell a brand as the brand. And I think that would be much more beneficial for comics retailers, be able to market to not just the comic book fan base, but the general population as well. So I think that would be how I would handle things with Marvel and DC in that respect. One thing that does change things for me as well is that I would probably, I won't say fire, because that's not really the phrase. It's more phasing out some of the writers and artists who are at Marvel and DC right now, not because they're bad talent, but if you look at the industry right now, there's a lot of writers who are working for multiple publishers besides Marvel and DC at the same time. And my feeling is if, that's keeping other people, that's something that is gatekeeping. If they're at 6 and 7 and 8 different publishers at the same time, that means, hey, someone else isn't getting a turn. So my feeling is I tell a lot of these creators who have multiple books that are at Marvel and DC, hey, you got 2 or 3 or 4 creator-owned books at other publishers, go focus on that, and I'm going to give someone else a turn on the Marvel or DC characters. I think that's just fair in my estimation. Some people may disagree. Next question. Hi, BR. I was wondering if you ever heard of the Webtoons comics platform, and if so, what do you think about it? That comes from RJ from Connecticut. Well, RJ, I did hear of Webtoons recently. I'm not that familiar with it. I understand it's a comics platform that people read on their phones. I've only heard about it in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not familiar enough with it to have an opinion yet. So I'll probably return to this question sometime in the future after I've had a chance to examine it and study it further. But thank you for your question. I appreciate it. Next question. Hey, Raven. I just came across some comics you did back in the 90s. Do you still make some of those books? And if so, where can I get them at today? Kevin T. from Chicago, Illinois, who I believe has another question as well. Let me check. Yes. Are there any current plans to bring back any of the comics I did back in the 90s, like Twilight, Space of the Alien, Larry Livewire, Komodo, or Supreme 6? Well, Kevin, that's okay. Some yes, some no. There's possible things that could happen. Twilight, no. The character is that story concluded. If you can find the 5 issues or 6 issues I did of that back in '93, it was a limited series. It's all there. Unfortunately, I don't have the materials to get it reprinted in a collected edition, so I don't think I'll be bringing it back unless somehow I get a means to re-scan the pages or something from a printed version of it, because I don't have any of the files anymore. As for Spacey the Alien, I will bring that back at some point. I'm not sure exactly what format yet. When I did Spacey back in the early 90s, it was a comics and coloring activity comic, black and white, that I sold in restaurants and daycare centers and hospitals and stuff for kids, not really to the comic book community. But it was very popular from 93 to 96. And then I repurposed the comics as a comic strip online in 98 and 99. But if I bring that character back, it will be a completely different take, because I won't be doing the alien who teams up with the kids to do adventures. It'll be more of a comedy book, I guess, perhaps is the best way I'd put it. Larry Livewire, absolutely not bringing that back. Main reason being, I will be drawing Larry, so people will understand this later on, not tonight, but in a future episode of Quoth the Raven Live Draw. I will draw Larry, and reason I'm not going to bring Larry back is because people are going to confuse it and think I swiped it off of Disney Pixar's character Wall-E, even though I did my version back in the 90s. So I'm going to show that character and talk about that character on a live draw session in the future and give a little bit of history on that. But I'm not bringing him back because of that reason, and the fact that at the time that I wrote that comic, it was meant to be kind of a comedy strip that was a little bit too, I won't say risque, just a little bit too outmoded for today's audiences. It was very much a product of its time, and it was too reminiscent in some facets of Jim Davis's Garfield, as Larry was a robot built by an owner, and the robot and the owner had similar interactions to the way Garfield and John Harbuncle do in the Garfield comic for Jim Davis's Garfield. So I don't think I'm going to bring that one back. As for Komodo, I don't know. If I do bring it back, I won't be writing it. I'm going to hire another writer, and we're going to go in a completely different direction with that character. So I don't know if that'll happen. I haven't spoken to the person I want to see write it, but we'll see at some time. Lastly, Supreme 6. I can't bring that one back under that title, partly because of the word Supreme. As many comic book fans know, very famous comic artist named Rob Liefeld does a character named Supreme. While my characters came out before his Supreme book came out from Image in 92, I was doing Supreme 6 as early as 1990 in the Amateur Press Alliance zines. I did receive a cease and desist, which is part of why that series ended at issue 6. And truth be told, I'm probably going to bring back the characters in another capacity. I'm looking to acquire the rights to another superhero team property book from a friend of mine that I went to college with and was a member of the Kappa CMU group. And if I get the rights, then I'm going to merge those two teams and start a whole new property with those two properties. Okay? So that will be those sort of things. And thank you for your question, Kevin. I appreciate it. Next question. I bought a copy of your art book, Wingman Volume 1, years ago. Have any of the comics previewed in that art book come out yet? Mark Z. from North Carolina. Wingman Volume 1 came out in 2011. In that art book, there are 3 projects that are previewed. One is entitled Spellseeker, which was originated back in the early 90s. That book cannot come out with that artwork. The penciler whose art was displayed that I worked with on that, Mr. Matthew Cammert, unfortunately, he passed away from kidney disease at a very young age, and I have not found a new artist to replace him yet. But when I do find an artist to replace him, yes, we will eventually bring out Spellseeker. Another one was called Revolution 2250, and again, that will come out at some point, but I'm looking for another collaborator to collaborate with on that book so I don't have to write it and draw it. And lastly is Blake and Terror Intergalactic Thieves, the first book of which is called The Crystal Conspiracy. And to give you an update on that, that is scheduled tentatively for July 2020 release. The reason it's taken so long is because both my parents suffered some massive health problems, and my mother passed away, and I went through a very depressive funk that I've only recently started to back out of my shell and start getting back into doing the work. And that's part of the reason why I've done the podcast, is because we want to do more interaction with audience and try and get myself back out there in the market, because I've been kind of on hiatus for far too long, and it's time to get back into the swing of things. So thank you very much, Mark, for your support on that book. And I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, and I'm sorry that you're going to wait a little bit longer, but hopefully not too much longer. We'll try and get it out there for you next year. Maybe not even just Blake and Terror, but maybe one of the other books as well. It just depends on how soon I can find a collaborator, and we can get the money to afford everybody and get everything on schedule. And our next question is, hello, Mr. Raven. Are you going to participate in this year's 24-hour comics event? Tom H. of Ohio. Well, first off, Tom, thank you for being polite and calling me Mr. Raven. It's actually Bright Raven, but thank you. I appreciate the politeness. Am I going to participate? That's been something that's I've been racking my brains on that recently, ever since I read your question. For those of you who don't know what the 24-hour comics event is, you're supposed to attempt to write, pencil, and ink and letter a full 24-page comic within 24 hours, which is basically a page an hour. It's not, pardon me, it's not impossible, but it's not like you're going to be doing your absolute best work at that frantic a pace. So I haven't really made up my mind on that. Also in October, which is when the 24-hour comics event takes place the first week of October. But the full month of October is known as Inktober, where every day you're supposed to do sketches of artwork in ink. And I'm kind of waffling between the two. I don't know. I know I can't do both. There's just no way. I'm kind of favoring the Inktober stuff right now. I don't know. But if I do the 24-hour comics event, in fact, I'll ask you guys, do you want to see a 24-hour comic from me? And if so, what what do? You guys gonna buy it? I mean, don't just say yeah, but I mean, seriously, if people want to see me and want to pay me to do a 24-hour comic, I might consider it if enough people are really on board with that. So we'll see. Okay, but right now I'm kind of favoring Inktober instead. Next question comes from my Indie Volt host, and helps with production a little bit on this show as well. Comes from Varian Grant of Michigan, and it's, why is it that digital artwork has been embraced by artists, but digital comics have either stagnated or seem to have a lack of support from the comics fandom? Well, Varian, I think part of the problem between comics in the digital format versus the print, it has created two different divergent audiences that want different things from comics. And hello, Varian. I see you there in the chat. When you have people who are doing digital comics and you're reading them on tablet or phone, they have a different mentality than the paper comics audience did, because the paper audience has been collecting a physical copy for years, decades, maybe all their lives. And the newer audiences don't have that tactile connection to the paper format. So that is a little bit of a different thing, because conversely, the paper fans they feel like something's missing from digital comics. It's not necessarily missing. The content, the story is there. It's just not tactile per se. It's on a screen. Whether it be a phone screen or a tablet or a computer. When I did webcomics in the late 90s, when I did Larry Livewire and Spacey in webcomics, I found out very quickly that it was very difficult to sell Larry as a print comic, even in collected editions, because the audience that was doing the digital side were like, oh, no, thank you. I've already read it. I'm good. I don't need it. Or maybe they already downloaded the images and had a collection of the strips on their computer and could just look at them already and didn't pay me. Who knows? Probably a little bit of both. So I think that, of course, that was 20 years ago, and there's different markets now. But whether it's Webtoon, which we've briefly mentioned, or Comixology, which has been around for several years now, or other digital platforms, it's a different audience. It's younger. It's an audience that doesn't seem to have the same connection to the characters that the paper audience does as much, which again is causing some of why we had the problems with Comicsgate, and because the younger audiences are not connecting to the older creators. They're not connecting to the older characters. They want their older characters to be what they want, and the older audiences want it to remain the way they remember the characters and enjoy the characters. And that's one of the reasons why sales are dropping in the print as well. So I think that's the biggest problem, is that we have that disparity in that those two different formats. Trying to think here. That's part of it, but I think the other thing is price format. I don't know what it costs for digital comics downloads. I'm pretty sure like 99 cents or maybe $1, $1.50 or something in some cases. And then I guess I believe the major publishers, Marvel and DCU, still doing a download at the same cost as a print comic, which is today is running $3 to $5 a printed comic. So if they're downloading at $3 a book, then it's the same difference. But if they're getting it at a lower price point, then yeah, they're going to want digital, but they're not going to support print as a result of that. But I don't know. It's weird because, as you say, there's a stagnation there, and I think what it is just that the younger audience hasn't come into their full bloom yet to see what they're going to do, if they're going to fully embrace the digital side or not. It's probably going to happen at some point during our lifetimes. I don't know exactly when. Probably later rather than sooner, I would imagine. It might even be a situation where I won't say print comics will go away entirely because I don't believe that, but I think that audiences will start swaying more towards these other formats if they can't find content in the print format, which is what seems to be happening in the comic book industry these days. You got anything else that you'd like to add to that, Varian? He said, hoorah, but that was probably because I actually read this question. Okay, well, I don't want to give too much dead air time, folks, so I'm going to move on since Varian didn't give me a response in the chat yet. That is pretty much all the mail order questions that I got pre-show. And we do not have very many people watching the broadcast right now. So I'm going to move on from questions to something else soon. I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do next here. Well, in case you do have questions. Whoops. Hit the wrong button. Apologize for that. If you have questions, you can email them to me at quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. Subject QTR questions. Please indicate whether you want your name and locale read on air. If you don't, that's fine. You can give me initials or nothing at all. It doesn't matter. Please no trolling questions, as it were. I'm not here to slam anybody or disparage other creators or anything like that per se. I something was really, really wrong or something, I might discuss that. But chances are we save that pretty much for the roundtable discussions at Indie Volt through because that's usually part of the industry news when something like that actually happens. So, but if you have questions for me about my past work or what when I'm doing a live draw, what tools I'm using, or what books I'm reading, or what books I'm not reading and why, or whatever, go ahead and ask about that, and I'll give them a shout and see what we can come up with. Okay. That went fast, a lot faster than I thought it would. So, without further ado, we will go into our first pseudo sponsor of the night. Hold on a moment. We will take that off the air for a moment. Ted Davies asks, Lewis, what is your favorite read right now? Comics or graphic novels, and why? When you say favorite read, you mean like an individual title, or do you mean just format floppies versus graphic novels, or both? I'm trying to think here. That's interesting. I think I prefer the graphic novels or trade collections more these days than the floppies, but I get a lot of floppies. So, because it's a weird dichotomy with our market right now, Ted. Um, I prefer the trades because I get the complete story and the collection as a general rule of thumb. The problem is if you don't buy the, he says yes. uh, there we go. Um, the problem with it is if you don't support the individual issues, there's a good chance the book won't get collected into a trade collection, so you won't have a graphic novel to read. So you have to kind of look at what you really, is it worth it? And then you have to look at the price points. Most comics, I say, they're like $3.99, $4.99, $5.99 a book. But if the trade collection ends up being more money than it would cost you to buy the singles, then I go for the singles as a general rule of thumb. Current favorite books. That's a good question. Geez, I'm not a person that really follows comics as the typical fan might. I'm not a person that has been following the same characters for decades, years on end anymore. I used to be that type of reader, but I'm not anymore. I tend to go for creator-owned books that are science fiction and fantasy oriented, horror oriented, more so than traditional superhero stuff. Although there are some superhero books I'll read now and again if the right project comes out. Recently, I got a couple of issues of Detective because the artist Kyle Oates is a friend of mine, and I wanted to support him on that book because I've been wanting to see him draw Batman since the early '90s when I first met him back in Motor City Con. So there's that. Let's see. I enjoyed that stuff. Let's see. Favorite titles right now. Trying to think of what's coming out right now that you might know about. Let me take a quick break here. I'm going to go off screen for just a second, folks. I'll be right back. And we're back. I apologize for the delay there. It came to my thought that, and I was going to bring this up when I got into the book reviews, but we'll bring it up now. Recently, DC Comics canceled their Vertigo Comics imprint, which was their creator-owned science fiction, fantasy, horror line of titles that originated back in the late 80s, early 90s from DC, and it was launched by Karen Berger, who has since left the company. And a lot of fans have been up in arms about that. And I realized that a lot of stuff I'm buying right now comes from Karen's new line of product, Berger Books, which is published through Dark Horse Comics. So a lot of the stuff I'm reading are books like J.M. DeMatteis's The Girl, get over here, The Girl in the Bay, which is, now when I get these books, I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of times what happens is I will buy product for issues on end without reading them, and then I sit down and read them because I'm buying them as singles, and like I said, I tend to prefer to read the whole story at once. So sometimes I'll read like the first 2 issues, and then I haven't read them for a few months. So I don't always remember the whole story right now. So I can't really talk about what they're about just yet. I was going to save some of these for future future editions of the show. But I will point them out so you'll know what's coming shortly in future episodes. Invisible Kingdom is another one by G. Willow Wilson and Christian Ward. And a book that we will be talking about later this evening is Everything, which is the first issue, just came out from Christopher Cantwell and I.N.J. Cowbird. And there's other books like She Could Fly and Mata Hari and some other books that, to me, if you're a Vertigo fan, that's where you should be headed and not worrying about what DC's doing or not doing. That's one of the things I've been gravitating towards right now. As far as so-called mainstream independent comics, I'm waiting to hear back from stuff, but I've also recently did something on Indie Volt Tuesday Night Chat or Tuesday Night Talk, where I presented the Gladstone School for World Conquerors books a few weeks back. I will be bringing the newest edition of that as soon as it comes in the mail. So there's going to be a one-shot series that just got funded, and they just got the books in-house, and they're packing and shipping. So I should get them in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we might even have the creators on the show. So on this show, not on TNT, but we'll see. Yeah, that's some of the stuff I've been gravitating towards in more recent time, Ted. So we will now go back to our first scheduled pseudo sponsorship. This weekend, we will have a comic book convention one-day show in the Flint, Genesee area. It's Flint Fall Comic Fest. It's the third one. It's on this Saturday, September 14th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the downtown Flint Farmers Market. This is run by Mr. Randy Zimmerman, who is one of our round table representatives on Tuesday Night Talks. And he's also a even more experienced creator and publisher than I am in the industry. He's been around over 30 years. He's also very well known in the Flint, Michigan, Genesee County area for both his Flint Comics newspaper, which he ran 100 issues for 10 years, and his Preservers comic book that he does for please forgive me, Randy, I've forgotten the name of the show, the name of the preserve that Formar Preserve. There it is, there in Burton, Michigan. So yeah, he's there, and it's only $5. Children 12 and under are free. There will be grab bags at the door, and some of the guests include William Lesnar Loebs, best known for his writing on The Flash and Wonder Woman for DC Comics, and writer of the Image comic, which later became an MTV cartoon series called The Max. You may remember that from the early 90s. And also a book called Journey. Another guest that will be there will be Scott Rosema, best known for X-Men Adventures, perhaps, or other. I also think he did Space Ghost, and he's been around for quite so long. I could be here all day listing stuff, but the stuff I remember him for is X-Men Adventures and Space Ghost. And also, they're going to have a newcomer to the comic book industry. They're bringing them in young these days. Young talent, Caden Grant, and he's only 9 years old, and he's going to be there promoting his company, Root Beer Press. So be sure to stop by if you are in the Flint, Genesee County, Michigan area, or if you are anywhere within a reasonable driving distance of that area this weekend. You have nothing better to do, which, hey, what are you going to do? Go watch football? Oh, please. Go get some comics. Go meet some cool people. So there's that. And you're welcome, Ted. I'm going to be doing some other stuff here in a little bit. Ted said thank you in the chat. We'll be doing that this weekend. And there's Varian, if you're around. Would you like to mention where you're going to be this weekend? Oh, I'm sorry. I just remembered something. Ted Davies is going to be at Flint Fall Comics Fest as well, I believe, with his comic book Retrieve. Sorry about that, Ted. I should have remembered that. And that book is Retrieve is from Last Call Comics. And Varian has not responded, so we will go on to our next thing. And that will be reviews. It's not wanting to do what I want it to do. There we go. And we'll start with everything. Everything, number one, publishers Burger Books, Dark Horse. The writer is Christopher Cantwell, who also wrote the She Could Fly books from Dark Horse and Burger Books. And I believe he does a TV series, but right now the name escapes from me. Artist is I.N.J. Culbert. I hadn't heard of Culbert before, and very interesting artist. We'll be looking at his work shortly. The genre is mystery, horror, drama, and it was released last week, September 4th, 2019. The book's about inexplicable events and a horrifying mania that have begun to plague the town of Holland, Michigan. Holland is an actual town in Michigan. It's a real place, people. So that's a nice little thing that they do, in my opinion, because I like it when they take small towns and different places instead of going to the major cities that everybody knows. So anyway, what could be the source of these disturbances? Only a few suspect that it might have something to do with the brand new Superstore Everything and its all too perfect manager, Shirley. Now, I apologize. I'm going back and forth between different screens here. Everything is very much a Twin Peaks type of feel to it. The characters in the town have their own individual issues. And it's like any normal small town. A lot of the businesses are going under, and the youth are a little bit disaffected from society around them a little bit. And this new mega store type thing called Everything comes in. It's supposed to be bringing new jobs and new things. Oh, my buzzer's about to go off. It's a little bit of a warning. But anyway, as I was saying, everything is it's like a giant super Walmart. It's like 10 times bigger, and you can get literally everything in it. And Shirley is looking for employees, and they kind of go Stepford a little bit, maybe Stepford Wives style. And this is a very peculiar supernatural type story. And we're going to look at the artwork here real quick. There we go. I can't make it any larger, unfortunately, and I apologize for that. And I'm going to turn off my buzzer. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I just keep an egg timer so that I don't run out. Hopefully, I won't run out of time on this. But anyway, as you can see, I put out 2 different pages. These are not coinciding pages of one after the other. They're 2 individual pages on the book. I'm liking the artwork for it's got a very similar style to an artist I like by the name of Guy Davis, who you may remember did some of Mike Mignola's Hellboy comics and BPRD comics back in the 90s. And he's also the artist who did some design art for the Hellboy movie by Guillermo del Toro, and the what's the name of that thing? Pacific Rim. He designed the kaiju, the monsters in that movie. But on the left, the artwork reminds me very much of the kind of style of work that Guy does, and some of the upper right as well. Shirley in the bottom right corner doesn't really remind me of Guy, so it's an interesting thing there. But that's what probably drew me to the book, was the artistic style. Reminded me of someone I liked, and the story is very interesting. It's a first issue, so there's you're barely getting your setup and exposition to find out what's going on. So I really can't say all that much about it yet in terms of what I think of it in story wise, because there's just not enough there to say, yeah, I'm interested in continuing, but I'm not entirely like gung ho just yet. I gave the book a rating of 3.5 out of 5 stars, partly because it is just getting started, and I'm not completely sold yet on the storyline, but I'm still there. I'm not I'm not disappointed in it in any way, shape, or form. I would recommend it for fans of X-Files and Twin Peaks, and it's definitely a mature reader's age 16 and up book. I would not. This is not a book you want to give your 12-year-old or your even a younger teenager, I don't think. Mostly because a lot of the younger teenagers these days don't seem to grasp some of the mature themes, and at least from what I'm seeing in my area. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. So here's that issue. Okay. And I don't know if okay, next one is Resonant. And I did the first 2 issues for $3.99 each. Publisher's Vault Comics. The writer is David Andre. Alejandro Aragon is the artist. Colorist is Jason Wardy. Letterer is Darren Bennett. The genre is horror, and it was released in July and August of 2019. I believe it was July and August. It might have been, it had to be July and August. So what it's about. Uh, a decade after a mass pandemic, a father and his three children are separated. Well, in a post-apocalyptic world, when the father's trip to acquire the medicine his youngest son needs to survive goes awry. What will they do to survive and reunite with one another? This is a book that I recommend for fans of The Walking Dead. Walking Dead is a very popular comic book that has come to an end, and it's been made into movies and TV shows, or not movies, but multiple TV shows. This is not a zombie book. This is about a pandemic caused by some sort of supernatural wave of energy or something that drives people crazy and makes them do insane things to each other. Not so much rage, but just weird afflictions to themselves, like tearing their skin off with their fingernails, and, just because they hear in their head from the ways it makes them hear that you want to tear your skin off your body, stuff like that, and that comes from the possibly, as you can see from the cover of issue number 1, there's these two bugs on the girl's finger, and that is the daughter of the family, by the way, and that is the same girl in the right with one leg, and she starts with one leg in the book. She's disabled, but those critters that you see on her finger, they can detect when the energy or the wave is coming and can warn you to protect yourself. So I find that interesting. And so I like that. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened there. Apparently I got knocked out, but we'll get that back up for you folks. There we go. So the artwork reminds me a little bit of Bill Sienkiewicz, or Brian, or not Brian, but Simon Bisley, when they were doing natural painting. This is all done digitally, I can tell, but it's as far as the color work is done, it's all digital as far as I can tell. But very, very nice and eye-grabbing, very attentive. And here's some of his interior art from Alejandro Aragon. As you can see, this is the scene where the father is letting his daughter and her other two siblings know that he has to go leave to get the medicine for his youngest son, who is, I don't know if he's terminally ill, but he's definitely ill. And then this is another scene from, I believe it's the second issue, where the father has befriended a dog, and they dive into the high weeds and brush because they've come across a bunch of people who, as you can see, are being dragged by ropes and chains through the mud and dirt, and that's because they're just following this delusional woman called Ma. So, they've removed their eyes, and they're dragging them through the dirt and stuff. So, what I do find a little bit odd about this is the comment on the second page in this scene. He tells the dog, "Don't worry, we're going the other way. Listen here, pup. Avoid people if you can. Nothing good comes from them." And, well, as the story progresses, the first thing he does, he comes into a compound where a bunch of people are, and talks to them, and of course he gets captured, and the dog gets captured, and we don't know what's going to happen next, because that's where they give you the cliffhanger. But it's like, okay, is that foreshadowing or just silly writing? It's foreshadowing, but it's a little bit predictable. So that's part of why I gave him a little bit of a knock on the 4, down from a 5 to a 4. But other than a little bit of stuff like that, I really like the book, and I think this is a good horror comic for most people. I would recommend it for 16 and up, though, because it's pretty heavy in some of the ideology. Oh, and Ted, if you're listening, I know that your Retrieve book is watercolored, but let me take a look here. I haven't had a chance to really get a chance to see your book yet, but is this kind of stuff something you think you can do someday, this style of art? I'm going to go ahead and leave this for a little bit and let Ted, if he's still around, still watching. Ask him if he's still here. And I see I got apparently 3 people watching. I appreciate some likes. Maybe some shares, let people know it's out there. It's I know it's my first time and I'm trying, but a lot of people I know are going to be missing the actual live show because they've got other things going on. They'll be watching later in the week, and that's okay. Yeah. Yep. Are you're still here, or yep, that you can see what I see as something that similar to your style of art. It's kind of hard to do these by yourself in a way, isn't it? It's different, than the round table, because if I try to give other people in the chat a chance to respond, it sort of gives us a little bit of dead air compared where before we have Varian and Randy and I and others. There's always somebody talking, but I think it's only fair I try to give the audience some interaction if at all possible. And we're going to go ahead and go on to the next project. And that is Star Pig. I just like calling it that, saying it that way. It's $3.99 each. It's 4 stars out of 5. Publishers IDW. Delilah Dawson is the writer. Francesco Gaston is the artist. Sebastian Chang is the colorist. Letterer is Sean Lee. And it was science fiction genre, released July and August of 2019. What it's about is in the late 21st century, 16-year-old Vess is on her way to space camp when her space shuttle leaves her on the verge of death. Rescued by the spacefaring water pig, the adventure begins. Well, what actually happens is our pig actually rams into the space shuttle and destroys it, splits it in half, and all the people leave. And somehow, inexplicably, the pig decides to ingest her, so to speak, and keep her alive inside him for a little bit until he is brought in by space scavengers. And then they have a little adventure with the space scavengers. And this is the point where she's actually inside the space pig. And as you can see, everybody else in the group is dead. And it's an interesting, Delilah Lawson's doing a very interesting job with the writing. We're supposedly in the far 21st century, like, hundreds of years from now, almost 22nd century. And a lot of the dialogue is interwoven with slang from the 80s and 90s. And there's a reason for it. For some reason, there's some sort of cultural affectation towards that sign. And I don't really, it's interesting because it's like, for me, it's like, I'd rather see her come up with her own slang that's unique and futuristic, that still fits the context of what she's trying to do with the story. But I understand why she's doing what she's doing. So it's interesting, and it's the one thing that kind of it I don't know if it bothers me, but it's just a little bit of a quirkiness that's why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. Otherwise, I really think it's a really good book. Again, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I would recommend this for ages 12 and up. It's there's no cussing in it. It's a lot of silliness in it, but it's still a little bit too mature for an all ages book. So, our all ages grading. So I would say 12 and up would be my advice on this particular title. And our next book is Strayed. And that is Strayed number 1, $3.99, published by Dark Horse Comics. The writer is Carlos Scafoni. The artist is Wando. Letterer is Matt Kreutzer. And I forgot to invite Matt to watch the show tonight. He's one of my Facebook friends. I apologize for that, Matt. I'll text you later and let you view if you want. Genre is science fiction. It was released August 21st of 2019. And what it's about, as you can see, scientist Kiara Rodriguez and her cat Lou. And that is Lou on the cover. A reluctant parties serving in military organization has ruled over the galaxy and is destroying planets. Not planet. I accidentally got screwed up on that graphic. Sorry about that. And entire species of races for resources. I'm going to go ahead and put that up there from Ted. Ted did respond. And it's not easy, I understand. People are on the phone or watching shows on the phone or watching other things, doing things. Yes, I do think that Resonant is an excellent looking book. And I really think that's right up your alley, Ted, is that type of a book and that type of a look necessarily. So I presume you're still talking about Resonant, but you might also be talking about Strayed, because that's a really good looking book too. Anyway, the technology that Kiara Rodriguez creates allows her cat to travel by astral projection to scout other worlds and check the intellectual levels of any life forms on these planets to see if they're too smart. Then we don't try to kill those races and stuff like that, type of thing. Try and find the resources, but no life on the planet type thing. But she wants out of the thing, and she wants the cat out. And of course, the organization's not going to have anything to do with that. So we're going to see what happens. Are they going to be able to escape? And what's the next move? I would say this is ages 13 and up. It reminds me of classic science fiction from like Robert Heinlein's. I'm trying to think of the word. Juvenile science fiction series stuff. Andre Norton's juvenile science fiction. It's very, very classic stuff. Very good plot structure, strayed. It's also, since it's about the cat, Animal Comics, fans of that probably like this as well. And here is Juan Doe's interior art. And this is the cat astral projecting on the left page, looking around. And, basically, there's, the boss is telling him, hey, tell the cat to find me a planet or else. I'm running out of patience. And as you can see, the cat can actually speak Lou back. I like that stuff in terms of that. This is Juan's been doing gangbusters on this book, not only on the artwork, but he's becoming one of the more popular artists in comics in the independent scene. I should say the mainstream independent scene. He's been doing a lot of stuff for Aftershock and for Dark Horse lately. It's been getting a lot of high praise, and it's much deserved. And the cat is now gone to sleep, and this is what these guys do. They come in, they colonize and kill everybody on the planet. And this entity that is mentally connected to Lou, the cat, is asking him to wake up and help save these lives that are being killed. So the cat is having nightmares, being chased by everybody in his dreams in the comic, and it's pretty wicked stuff. And yes, Ted says he likes the storyline and content. Or pardon me, he likes the art rather. His art is a little more grainy and dark on Retrieve compared to Resonant. And his book will continue to become more refined. And yes, have a great night. Yes, you too, Ted. Thank you for stopping in. We appreciate you stopping by. And the next book is Tommy Gun Wizards, number 1, $3.99, publisher's Dark Horse. This is written by Christian Ward. Earlier, I had shown you a book called Invisible Kingdom from Burger Books. And the writer of this book is the artist of the Invisible Kingdom, which we will get to in a future time. The artist is Sammy Cavaglia. Colorists are Christian and D. Cunneth. Letterer is Hassan and Hassan. I beg you, I have no idea how to pronounce your last name. Forgive me if I slaughtered this. Tsmane Alhau? I have no idea. I hope I didn't slaughter that too bad. Genre is alternate history, fantasy, crime fiction, and it just came out late August. It's a alternate universe in 1930 Chicago, where Elliot Ness's Untouchables wage a war against Al Capone and the mob, not over the prohibition, just the prohibition of alcohol, but also that of dealing and partaking in the use of magic. It's very, very cool stuff. It's what you get if you put like Cthulhu or that type of dark, sinister stuff in with Elliot Ness, Al Capone, that sort of stuff. So it's a really good combination of the two. And here's a quick 2-page spread from the artwork. As you can see, there's kind of this weird monster. This actually was a monster made of puke. The Elliot Ness and his men arrested a guy from a illegal bar, and he got sick in their jail and was puking out everything, and he came out with this. And next guy just shot him with a shotgun. So there's that. Let's see. Yep, next one. I'm going to go back here real quick. I think the cover of the artwork here is also Christian's art instead of Sammy. Obvious, I shouldn't say obvious, but if you were to compare the two art styles, I mean, that's kind of given. But Christian does the colors, and then on the cover, I believe, is Christian's as well. Christian's painting style. But I like the book a lot. Only reason I'm giving it a 4 instead of a 5 is it's the first issue. I want to see where it goes before I start saying anything really. Yeah, this is the, this is the big one. This is the shit. Let's give it a little bit of time to breathe. Give it a little bit more time to develop the storyline. It's for what I would consider adult fans of Harry Potter. Think of it as more of a darker version of Crimes of Grindelwald, with Elliot Ness and the Untouchables being the guys hunting down the wizards or something, type thing. It's kind of cool in that respect. So I'm digging it. And we got Tri-Age, number 1, $3.99. Now, this is a limited series edition. There's only going to be 5 issues of it. And this is the first issue. Publishers by Dark Horse. The writer, artist, and colorist is Philip Sevy. The letterer is Frank Kvektovic. The genre is science fiction, and it just came out this past week, September 4th. Now, I gave people a little bit warning earlier today on the Thursday night or Thursday morning talk show on Indie Vault, where I do roundtable discussions with Varian and Randy, that there's going to be books that are going to have a little bit adult content. This is definitely one of those. It's definitely a 16 and up book. A dedicated nurse named Evie Pierce wakens to an unfamiliar word alongside 2 other women, one a young and snarky superhero, the other a hardened rebel military commander of a post-apocalyptic world. When a mysterious figure begins to hunt them, which is the figure you see on the cover here, the women must work together to survive and discover why they were assembled. Whoop. I hate when it does this. I will get there. Just give me a second. There we go. This is what I was talking about. This is a little bit of a gross scene here. It's the first page of the comic on the left. It's not that it's a gross scene per se. I just, this is something that happens. She's a nurse. She's helping a woman who's pregnant. And I don't know if she's trying to put a catheter in or what she's trying to do. I think that's what she's trying to do. And she gets pissed on in the face. And I guess that happens in nursing sometimes, but I didn't really appreciate that. And that's kind of why I knocked it down a little bit. I didn't think that was a necessary point to the story necessarily. But for the first page, it was a kind of a turnoff. But the rest of the story it picks up pretty good. I did not, but the first thing I do is when it's split. This is not the second page, by the way, on the right. This is like the 5th or 6th page in the story. It goes to Evie, and she ends up losing her job. They fire her because she had made some complaint against a doctor who changed medical records on her and made it look like she did something wrong when the doctor was the one who did it wrong. which, that does happen a lot in medical practice, unfortunately. So at least that's realistic. As well as this situation, I just don't think it really needed to belong in a comic. Anyway, it cuts almost like a dramatic shift, change right to the second character, who is the female superhero that you see. And the coloring's nice, but both pages have their captions in the boxes in purple, and they kind of blend into the background. It's a little bit too much for me. I would have preferred that they were in bright yellow, or even just yellow, because it would have been easier for my eyes to read. And I think with the word, I'm trying to think of the phrase here. Why can't I think of the phrase? The sound effects, wham, 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 guide your eyes down towards the bottom right corner. It would have been better for it to just be yellow for sake of reading the dialogue in that particular setup. Let's see, we got some more art here. Yes. This is when Evie wakes up and finds out that she's in the multidimensional point, and we'll meet the other two shortly. I don't want to give away the twist. There's a twist going on, and all three characters are connected. It's very obvious what's going on. As soon as I saw the page with the superhero on it, I knew what the plot was very, very quickly. I wish they'd been a little bit more, I don't want to say obtuse, but a little less predictable on that. So that's part of why I only gave the book a 3-star rating. It's not bad. It's a good series, and I think that people who like science fiction and multiverse storyline telling will like what you're seeing here. But remember, it is it's got language, it's got some gross scenery there with the peeing in the face. So I would go 16 and up for that book. Mm-hmm. So that covers our comic reviews for this evening. Mm-hmm. And if you are a comics publisher and you want to send me digital copies of your artwork, it doesn't have to be at the high res, it can be low res, just something I can see what you're doing, and you want me to review your work, you can send digital copies to Quoth the Raven, LBR72@gmail.com. I'm not going to necessarily review your material on air. I won't. If I don't like your material, I will not have it appear on the show, and that's because I don't want to be negative and tear your stuff apart and say you suck or anything like that. If I don't like your work, I will still review your work, and I will tell you why I don't like it privately, and that way, you'll know what I think, and I'll try to be constructive and give you insights as how you can make it better. But I don't want to knock anybody publicly on that. So there's that. That's my worldview on that, and I hope people understand. And if you don't want to send me stuff, that's okay too. Just understand that I've only got so much money. I can only afford to buy so many books. But that's it for reviews for this week. And I need to check something. There we go. And that was 10:17. We are at 10:30. We've been here for an hour and a half. I got another 30 minutes of discussion. So we will go back a little bit, if that's okay with you folks. Is Varian still around? Or anybody who is viewing the show? I don't know who all is viewing. We got 4 viewers. I know Ted left. I had 5. So who's here besides myself? Let me know. Don't be afraid to say hello. Okay. People are afraid to talk to me. I'm not going to bite your head off, I promise. Ask me a question. Well, I got a message from Varian here, and just not in the chat. Is that a yep from? We lost a couple more viewers. I guess people were thinking I'm leaving. That's a bummer. Well, I don't know. Let's see what else we got here. I think we're going to call. Well, I thought I'd be a little bit faster or a little bit slower on some of this stuff, but we can go back to some of the questions. Oh, let's see what we got here. There was something else I wanted to talk about. There we go. And I've been talking about Indie Volt throughout the evening, so we'll just put in our second pseudo sponsor. Pseudo sponsors are people who did not pay to be promoted tonight. I just promoting them because they're my friends. This is indievolt.com. As you all know, I've been mentioning the Indie Volt Tuesday night chat and Thursday morning breakfast talk. As normally my where I've been seeing the last couple of about 5 or 6 weeks. So if you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to check out the Indie Volt channel on YouTube. Because when I'm not here, you'll find me on the Tuesday night TNT Tuesday with host Varian Grant, Renee Zimmerman, and a weekly array of guests as we have roundtable discussions on the state of the comics industry as well as other news. Indie Volt also has industry news, independent radio programming, and other content to stream via YouTube, on Roku devices, and on Indie Volt Radio, which is a radio app that you can download from Google Play Store or in the App Store on iOS. And so that will take care of my second sponsor for today. And if you would like to sponsor the show, it's very easy to do. All you got to do is go to PayPal at the address you see down below, quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. Send me $1 or $2, if you like. You don't have to. It's not important. But we try to get this set up because it does cost me money to run the show, and it helps me pay off my my StreamYard bill and my YouTube bill. Please. So anyway, that will be pretty much all for this evening, I believe, unless someone else comes in and wants to say hello. But that's okay. I believe this is the first episode, and like I said, a lot of people are watching and are not watching because they're going to go watch it later. And I want to thank those people for coming, and I want to thank Ted and Varian for saying hello, and for the other parties who came to watch, even if you didn't say anything. And we'll start coming back next time. And I'll be back on Saturday. And I will not be doing this kind of podcast. I'll be doing the live draw, where I will start doing illustration work from scratch of different characters. So you can also email me at the email address below, quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. And I'm going to draw my own characters for this week. But if somebody wants to, offer suggestions of characters, please make them clean. I'm not going to be doing nudes or grotesque scenes. But believe me, people come up with some weird inquiries or requests. So try to keep it PG, GPG, if you could, please. But I will look into doing some of that stuff starting Saturday. I don't know exactly what time. I'll put that up when it's time to put it up. Hopefully, I'll remember how to set this up, because this is the first time I've set it up, and we set it up a couple days ago with variant assistance, and I won't have that next time. But I hope to remember, and we'll see what's going on. Okay, so it has been fun. I appreciate you listening, as always, whether you're here at Quoth the Raven, at Indie Volt, see you at a show. Always, thanks for being here. And so, I believe it's time to give you my last informations. And here we go. If you want to reach me elsewhere other than here on Facebook, or pardon me, at YouTube, you can reach me at Facebook, at facebook.com/lewis.brightraven. You can see my artwork at deviantart.com/brightraven. Again, YouTube here, Quoth the Raven. Email is quoththeravenlbr72@gmail.com. And the podcast will always be here on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, hopefully more viewers in the future, or at least, for tonight. It's a good start, I guess, because we can't expect everybody to be doing shows. So, I bid you adieu until next week. Quote the Raven, nevermore.